Hello everyone and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. I'll stay in Italy with him. Brooke says she won't go back to Los Angeles with Ridge after being married to Nick. The ancient moist breath of the canal below, the cloying perfume of night-blooming jasmine, and the oppressive weight of 1,000 silent ends filled the air on the private Venetian terrace. Long, skeleton shadows were formed by the cold, ruthless moonlight, which silvered the black water's lap and clawed across the worn stone like the ghosts of regrets past. With his chest heaving not from effort but from the tectonic change taking place inside of him as the underpinnings of his universe collapsed, Ridge Forrester stood at the edge of his own destruction rather than the ocean. In the moments prior, he had been a manifestation of nature, bursting through the elaborate service door of the palazzo like a battering ram made of heavenly certainty and desperation. The splintering would a dramatic contrast to the subdued grandeur inside. Nick was a silent, vigilant sentinel next to Brooke, who was a vision in soft cream linen with an unnervingly calm countenance. He had discovered them sitting at a candlelight table rather than entangled. Ridge's entrance, driven by a transatlantic flight spent practicing apocalypses, his suit rumpled, his eyes burning with the terrifying fire of Brad Bell's endgame prophecy, had been met with a chilling, supernatural stillness that stopped his momentum dead rather than with Nick's defensive rage or Brooke's tearful capitulation. He had completely disregarded Nick, who was only a roadblock in the hallowed route that the story gods had prescribed. His intense attention on Brooke served as the conduit for his deluge, which included the tense rush to the airport, the near miss on the wet streets of Los Angeles, and the gut-wrenching fear that snatched at his throat at the idea of her being permanently tied to someone else. He had summoned Italy, not the mountains that almost killed him, not the wreck that left them both scarred, but the affirmation, Bell's pronouncement reverberating off the old stones in his spirit like cathedral bells. Desperation sapped his voice of its typical Forrester gloss, and he rasped, "Brooke, you know," his voice rough. In the charged air, his hands made wild gestures, creating invisible works of art. As Nick observed with disconcerting composure, he jerked his head dismissively and said, "You feel it. In your bones, in your blood. This is a beautiful lie. A still life. Perfect, peaceful, dead. But us?" His voice fell to a passionate whisper, heavy with decades' worth of experience. Bell exclaimed, "From the fucking heavens. Endgame. It's written. It's carved into the fabric of this godforsaken city, into the stars above it. We're the goddamn Sistine Chapel. Cracked, restored, maybe bleeding pigment in places, scarred by fire and clumsy restoration, but eternal." He stepped closer, his hand extended, not just an invitation but a lifeline thrown from the deck of his sinking certainty. "Come home, Brooke. Come back to the fire, the glorious, terrifying mess, the chaos that means something because it's alive. Come back, to me. Where you belong. Where you've always belonged." His invocation of fate hung in midair, a sacred invocation that crackled with the vulnerability of a fallen angel pleading for salvation before his goddess. The abrupt draft from the broken door gutted the candle flames. Then Brooke shifted. Not flinching in rage, not turning to the extended hand. She got up. The motion was purposeful, smooth, and filled with a frightful, icy calm that appeared to drain the room's heat. The illumination revealed a strange, heavy sparkle on her left hand, a wide band of antique, hammered gold with a deep, dark cabochon ruby instead of the gaudy diamond Nick had before provided. It had the appearance of a symbol, a seal etched into history that exuded permanence, rather than jewelry. Her back was a silent, impenetrable wall as she moved to the terrace railing, which overlooked the canal bathed in moonlight. She gathered an unseen garment of resolution, and for a moment she was a shadow against the silvered ocean. She turned, her face carved by the moonlight into something far away, lovely, and completely, tragically final. When her eyes met his, they contained something new and much more terrifying, absolute, unbreakable decision. There was no hint of the familiar rage, the vulnerable need, or even the glacial rejection of "you can't save us anymore." It was the silent, unyielding hardness of a mountain range determining its bounds for all eternity, not rebellion. "Ridge," she started, her voice clear and low, echoing in the quiet like the cool authority of a judge imposing a sentence. It sliced like a razor through silk through his strained breathing. You risked your life on rain-slicked roads. You flew across an ocean. Again. A glimmer of something deep, like grief? Recognition of the utter destructiveness of his devotion? Slipped through her eyes, disappearing too quickly to catch. She paused, allowing the weight of those ghosts to settle like ballast in the room, feeling their spectral fingers brush against her newly discovered peace. You invoked Bel. You invoked destiny. You invoked the ghost of us, dredging up every scar, every glorious, agonizing peak and valley. But you forgot one crucial element in your grand, tragic opera. She moved closer, controlling the space between them with quiet dominance rather than bridging the distance to closeness. Her eyes met his, like a prisoner facing his executioner in the dock. Her voice fell, each syllable a coldly precise stone set in the foundation of her new reality. You forgot me. You forgot that endgame isn't just a celestial decree whispered by a soap opera god. It's a choice. A conscious, daily, human choice. My choice. And you, Ridge Forrester, forgot the devastating, soul-crushing cost of your version of forever. She didn't speak louder. She didn't have to. There was a force field of quiet intensity. She pointed to the whispering water, the old palazzo stones, the smell of salt and history, and said, Italy wasn't just the backdrop for Belle's pronouncement of your divine right to me, Ridge. Italy is where I finally found silence. Real silence. Not the absence of sound, but the cessation of the screams. She saw him recoil, a muscle leaping in his clenched jaw, but she persisted, unrelenting as the tide. Her voice did not rise, rather, it deepened, resonating with a profound, bone-weary sorrow that seemed to emanate from the stones themselves. The screams of your betrayals echoing in empty rooms. The screams of my own shattered trust every time you walked away. The screams of humiliation when you publicly dissected my heart with your truths. The screams of hope dying a slow, agonizing death every single time you chose ambiguity over commitment, Taylor's martyrdom over my messy, demanding love. You talk about the Sistine Chapel with such reverence. Ridge, I was the restorer. For decades. Covered in the grime and blood of trying to salvage the masterpiece beneath the layers of grime you painted over us. Scraping away the jealousy, the lies, the casual cruelty, always hoping, desperately clinging to the belief that the original beauty was worth the agony of restoration. And what did I find beneath? She proceeded to look at him with the finality of a vault's closing. A fresco so fundamentally damaged by the very hands that claimed to worship it, that the restoration became an endless, Sisyphean cycle of pain. Each repair merely a thinner layer over a deeper crack, waiting for the next earthquake you would inevitably trigger. Ridge's wounded throat made a choked sound as he attempted to speak. Brooke. I can. I swear I can. No. The one word, colder than the Adriatic depths and sharper than Murano glass, cut through his protest. It was devoid of rage. It was finality, pure and unadulterated. The sound of sealing a tomb. She looked into his eyes without flinching and said, You can't. Not in the way that matters. Not fundamentally. She looked past him to Nick, who stood quietly by the table, a pillar of quiet strength, his face unreadable but radiating a calm solidity. The fire, the chaos, the desperate, possessive need to declare, to shatter anything that threatens your claim, that's not just a flaw, Ridge. It's your core. As intrinsic as your talent with a sketchpad. As undeniable as Belle's decree. It's the fuel for your brilliance and the poison for anyone who loves you. He gives me solid ground, unbreakable bedrock, mornings without the knot of dread in my stomach, laughter that isn't a nervous prelude to the next explosion of tears, and a love that feels like coming home, not reporting for duty on a battlefield I never chose. Nick, she continued, her voice softening infinitesimally, doesn't offer me a masterpiece destined for perpetual restoration. She held up her left hand, the ruby catching the moonlight, glowing like a captured ember of warmth and resolve. This, she said with her thumb on the ancient gold, isn't rebellion, Ridge. It's not a punishment. It's a choice. A conscious, deliberate, peaceful choice for sanity. for tranquility. For a love that builds a future, brick by steady brick, instead of one that burns everything down just to feel the heat of the flames. With a finality that was colder and more absolute than the marble statues that adorned the palazzo, she turned to face him fully now. It seemed as though years of accumulated hurt had etched a gap between them. She slowly shook her head in a gesture of unending sorrow and unwavering resolve. Your endgame, Ridge? The glorious, terrifying firestorm? The lightning strikes of passion that illuminate and incinerate in the same breath? The beautiful, soul-destroying chaos? She asked. She took one last big inhale, filling her lungs with the fresh, jasmine-scented air of Venice, as if washing away the last traces of the poisonous environment he carried with him. That's your destiny. Your necessary tempest. Not mine. Not anymore. She paused, allowing the name to linger in the quiet, a single syllable bearing the weight of one world rejected and another accepted. I choose the quiet room bathed in gentle light. I choose the steady, enduring flame that warms without consuming. I choose Nick. The next pause was heavier than the last. I'm staying. In Italy. With him. Permanently. The calm that surrounded her statement was not just silent, it was the void created when a star bursts. The water below seemed to stop lapping. The singing of the faraway gondolier disappeared. The breeze held its breath and died as well. Ridge saw only a whirl of Steffi's cynical detachment, Eric's paternal worry, and Hope's worried face. His entire universe shrank to Brooke's calm, determined face, complete with the gleam of that damned emerald. The words came out as the slamming of enormous, bronze doors rather than as a sentence, I'll stay in Italy. With him. When he realized too late that the only paradise he had ever desired was the ultimate, irrevocable ceiling of a tomb he had spent his life attempting to escape. No. The gap her words caused snatched the breath away from the denial. An involuntary, pitiful gasp. Under the Venetian sun, the lofty words, the calls to cosmic destiny, and the primordial roars vanished like mist. Under his pricey loafers, he felt the ground melt. Not only was the Sistine Chapel of his fantasy damaged, but it was condemned and destroyed. The endgame heavenly mandate was rescinded rather than accomplished. Void. By her. Brooke Logan, his life's beacon, the woman whose name embodied his own disorderly nature, had gazed upon the ordained eternity and pronounced it inhospitable. She had rejected sacrament in favor of sanity. Sacred fire surrounded by stone walls. Nick Marone above heavenly fate. The weight of his broken eyes didn't make Brooke wince. She held it, her own with a grief as old and profound as the canals, yet supported by that dreadful, indestructible rock. She responded, "It's over, Ridge," in a quieter tone that yet echoed the subdued force of tectonic plate settling. She paused for a brief moment, a glimpse of the shared history that could never be erased, only mourned, before continuing, "Truly, finally over. Go back to Los Angeles. Go back to your world of spotlights and scandals, of designs and dramas. Build your empires. Create your masterpieces. But leave me," she said steadily, supported by the person by her side, "leave us, to build our peace. Here. In this quiet corner of the world, far from the perpetual storm you carry within you." She turned her head slightly, her eyes locking with Nick's. There was no fervent proclamation or victorious kiss for Ridge's sake. A cohesive front exuding calm certainty against the maelstrom of Ridge's misery, a silent communion of common resolve. Nick's hand moved, softly resting on the small of her back, but in a supporting rather than possessive manner. A silent promise. An offer and acceptance of refuge confirmation. The graceful stone terrace tilted dangerously, and Ridge staggered back a step. The picture burned into his retinas, Brooke in the moonlight, the ancient ruby gleaming on her finger, Nick's firm, unwavering presence by her side, the imposing silhouette of the Venetian palazzo rising behind them like an impenetrable fortress that she had not only entered but voluntarily barred the gates of, from the inside. The ruby is a symbol of roots, permanence, and a love that is built to last. Fueled by heavenly conviction, He had flown across an ocean only to discover that his angel had calmly informed him that he was banished for all eternity and that the gates of his promised paradise were locked. There was a huge, wailing emptiness, a wordless scream resonating in the hollowed-out cavern of his psyche, as the frenetic, world-bending energy that had brought him here drained away. He saw only powerlessness when he glanced down at his own hands, the hands that had forged steel, resisted death, and drawn works of art that touched millions. Tools proven ineffective in the face of Brooke's chosen piece as a movable object. He made no more pleas. In his mouth, the words were like ash. He was not angry. They put out the fire. He just broke. The weight of complete loss caused his shoulders' high, stubborn line to fold inward. He bent his head in complete defeat, not in submission. A solitary, treacherous tear trickled out, following a scorching, humiliating trail through the dust of his travels and landing on the old, heartless stone at his feet. He gave Brooke one more glance. She was a woman of deep, untouchable calm, not the erratic, passionate beast permanently bound to his turmoil. With heartbreaking clarity, he understood that he no longer knew the woman. A lady who had constructed an inner fortress so impregnable that not even the siren song of Endgame, nor the sacrificed evidence of his valiant actions so close to death, could break through it. The ancient, perilous flame that had always drew him back did not fracture or flicker. Just calm, inflexible stone. Ridge Forrester turned without saying anything. It was awkward, rigid, the gait of a man negotiating a world abruptly stripped of light, gravity, and purpose. He didn't turn to look at the broken doorway, which represented his pointless incursion. He passed stony-faced maids who turned away as he made his way down the palazzo's resonant, great staircase and out into the starry campo. The elegant curves of the gondolas mocked his broken linearity as they bounced softly on the ink-black lake. Beautiful and uncaring, the ancient city continued to sleep. And Ridge Forrester, the man destined for a timeless, epic tale of love, entered the Venetian night by himself. The cornerstone of his universe was removed, and the only sounds were the gentle slap of water against stone, the faraway, sorrowful cries of a lone gull, and the deafening, eternal silence inside of him, the silence of a divine endgame that was put out not by death but by Brooke Logan's silent, devastating decision: I'll stay in Italy. With him. The axis slanted. Protected by the constant, unflinching flame of Nick Marone's love, forever turned into a haunting memory, hidden behind the unbreakable stone walls of a Venetian palazzo. The decision was taken. Though the earthquake was mild, its aftershocks would permanently alter their lives, leaving Ridge lost on the sea of his own dashed hopes and lost in the maze-like streets of a city constructed on water.